Hello everyone, welcome to the Lightning Ball channel. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, please do so and activate the notification bell. Your support fuels my continued efforts. In our last episode, we discussed how Rimuru's Labyrinth Guardians showcased their prowess in the final battles within the underground labyrinth. Kamara crushed the enemy Colonel Kansas, achieving her revenge, while the Storm Dragon's disciple, the strongest guardian of the labyrinth, Zijin, single-handedly killed 4 of the enemy's formidable warriors, successfully annihilating the entire invading Imperial army within the labyrinth. However, despite this, the Eastern Empire's army still retained considerable military strength outside of the underground labyrinth. In this episode, we'll talk about Rimuru's ground combat plan and an unforeseen major crisis. Let's get started. So far, of the 700,000 troops the Empire sent from the ground, 530,000 had been annihilated. Additionally, since the Empire's Flying Combat Corps and Magitank Corps, which invaded Dworgen Nation, had been destroyed by Primordial White and Primordial Purple, the enemy forces on the ground outside the labyrinth were essentially isolated and without support. At this point, victory in the war seemed almost certain. It was then that a report from Lord of Wisdom came in, confirming that all enemies who entered the underground labyrinth, except one of the Imperial Guardians, Krishna, who used Resurrection Bracelet, had been successfully eliminated. According to Lord of Wisdom's judgment, there were no longer any enemies inside the labyrinth, signifying a state of complete safety. Based on this information, Rimuru concluded that the person from the Empire who killed him in another timeline, as mentioned by Chloe, seemed to no longer be a concern. This judgment was primarily based on the strength of the invaders of the labyrinth, like Kansas and Minutes, or members of the Imperial Guardians of the Emperor Rudra, who were only slightly stronger than Rimuru before he became an awakened demon lord. According to Chloe, Rimuru in other timelines had not evolved into a demon lord, so it made sense that he could have been killed by these invaders. After expressing his judgment, Rimuru looked around at his companions. Indeed, if it were Rimuru from another timeline, not only would he not have evolved into a demon lord, he wouldn't have summoned Diablo, and Beldora would likely still be inside Rimuru's stomach. There would also be no Labyrinth Guardians. In terms of combat power, the Rimuru from other timelines was incomparably weaker, so it was indeed plausible that he could have been killed. However, the Lord of Wisdom immediately refuted this assumption, believing that opponents of such strength would not have been able to kill Rimuru in other timelines. Nevertheless, Rimuru still thought it was possible, considering that in those timelines, Lord of Wisdom did not exist and was still in the state of Great Sage. This reasoning successfully silenced Lord of Wisdom. Noticing Lord of Wisdom's silence, Rimuru slightly reveled in this rare victory. Clearly, this overwhelming victory had somewhat elated Rimuru. Soon, the meeting returned to its main agenda, which was about handling the remaining enemy forces outside the underground labyrinth. Rimuru asked Benimaru if it was possible to eliminate these enemies without any casualties. Benimaru confidently stated that if the executives present took action, they could certainly accomplish this. Hearing this, Diablo, Cheyenne, and Primordial Yellow Carrera, who had not yet been deployed, nodded slightly, indicating that they would definitely secure victory for their Rimuru-sama if they were to join the battle. Seeing this scene, the Supreme Commander Benimaru smiled wryly, planning to stay as Rimuru's guard and let other executives take the opportunity to engage in combat. After some discussion, the specific battle plan was roughly as follows. Firstly, Benimaru's 30,000 Red Corps, also known as the Mixed Magian Corps, would serve as the main force, with Geld's Yellow Corps and Orange Corps at the front to absorb damage. Cheyenne's 10,000 secret troops would be responsible for guerrilla warfare. These legions combined would amount to over 50,000 soldiers. However, compared to the Empire's hundreds of thousands, they were still at a significant disadvantage. Therefore, someone needed to unleash a wide-ranging, highly destructive attack to sow chaos among the enemy and reduce their numbers. This task was originally meant for Benimaru, but since he had to stay by Rimuru's side as a guard, the duty was ultimately assigned to the violently tempered Primordial Yellow Carrera.
Leave it to me, my lord. You can look forward to it.
Carrera declared with a wicked grin, evidently plotting something sinister. The final task for the primordial demon Diablo was to track down Krishna, who had been resurrected using the bracelet, and head straight to the enemy's command center to execute their supreme commander, Kalgurio. However, there remained the issue of command within the Red Corps. Since Rimuru would not be participating in the battle, someone needed to step in to issue orders based on the evolving combat situation. Rimuru was considering assigning this role to his deputy, Gabwa, but he was abruptly interrupted by the sudden entrance of Momiji, the new Tengu tribe's leader and Hakura's daughter. Momiji insisted that the responsibility of acting as Benimuru's command proxy, as his future wife, should rightfully be hers. Rimuru was utterly bewildered by Momiji's sudden request, especially her declarations about being his future wife. As we detailed in our 12th episode, Rimuru, on official duty, had visited the Tengu tribe's village, where Momiji fell for him. However, she faced a rival for his affections, Albis from the Beast Nation, one of the 3 Beastketeers. Since Rimuru had been indecisive about whom to marry, both women had been engaged in a subtle battle for his heart. Now, Momiji's sudden appearance was also a move to secure her position as a future wife. Being Hakura's daughter, she had proven her strength and earned the trust of her companions, qualifying her to act as Benimuru's acting commander. Watching Benimuru's rigid reaction, Rimuru stepped in to accept the request on his behalf, affirming that Momiji would be a reliable acting commander. The other officers nodded in agreement, though Benimuru himself seemed reluctant. In reality, Benimuru's concern was for Momiji's safety, believing such a role was not suitable for her. However, he beat around the bush, losing the aura of a supreme commander. This hesitation prompted Shuna to storm into the room and scold Benimuru, criticizing his indecisiveness, which had left Momiji feeling insecure. While striving to improve her combat skills, Momiji also tirelessly sought Shuna's advice on cooking. Shuna asserted that as a man, Benimuru should clearly express whom he truly loved. Silenced by Shuna's words, Benimuru remained quiet, while everyone else looked on with gossiping expressions, curious about Benimuru's choice between Albis from the Beast Nation and Momiji, Hakura's daughter. Momiji, seizing the moment, made a bold declaration that she intended to earn victory with her own hands. This put Albis at a significant disadvantage. Just then, Albis herself appeared, explaining that she had come to report the arrival of 20,000 reinforcements sent by Malim. Faced with this development, Benimuru couldn't refuse Albis's troops because it was Malim's order, which only complicated matters further. Finally, Benimuru officially delegated his commanding duties to Momiji. Elated, Momiji vowed to complete the task perfectly, thus igniting a new battle between the two women. Amidst various developments, the lineup for the attacking plan was finally decided. As Rimuru issued the command for the entire army to mobilize, the officers immediately sprang into action, gathering their soldiers to prepare for deployment through teleportation magic. At this moment, Soyai received communication from Moss, reporting that a battle was sensed near Blumend Kingdom, and Miss Trainee was engaged in combat with someone. According to Soyai's intelligence, Miss Trainee had been missing for about 10 days and might have been fighting since then. Hearing this, Rimuru promptly dispatched Soyai to provide her with reinforcements. Consequently, Rimuru and Benimuru were the only ones left in the meeting room. The atmosphere suddenly became more subdued, and realizing there was nothing more to be done, both prepared to leave for the command center. Suddenly, Rimuru pondered a possibility. Now that only he and Benimuru were present, he hypothesized that if any enemy remained hidden within the labyrinth, they would not miss this opportunity to strike. Benimuru, however, felt the likelihood was extremely low. It seemed improbable for the enemy to time their moves so precisely. Rimuru agreed that Benimuru's point was valid and dropped the subject. After all, even the Lord of Wisdom had assured that the labyrinth was currently secure, so there seemed little need to dwell on these doubts. Nonetheless, Rimuru couldn't shake off a nagging sense of unease. Sensing Rimuru's discomfort, Lord of Wisdom reiterated that all personnel had been thoroughly verified. Rimuru had no doubt about this, but what troubled him were those he was familiar with, such as the Elian trio. If they were to betray him, it could inflict severe damage on his side. Of course, these three had built sufficient trust with Rimuru, and he cited them only as an example. He was confident about their loyalty, but couldn't be as sure about others. As Rimuru and Lord of Wisdom were discussing, a few individuals arrived from the Tempest City. The whole city now had relocated at the bottom of the underground labyrinth by magic. Leading the group was Masayuki, a character familiar to Rimuru, followed by his companions Jinrai and Bernie. We previously introduced Masayuki also in our episode 12, and here's a quick recap. Like Rimuru, Masayuki is from another world, and his arrival was quite miraculous. Walking home from school with friends, Masayuki saw a stunningly beautiful woman with blue hair, someone of unearthly beauty. However, the next moment, he found himself in an unfamiliar street. He had traversed to another world. There, he acquired the unique skill, the Chosen One, which came with 4 abilities: Hero's Haki, Hero's Blessing, Hero's Charisma, and Hero's Action. Hero's Haki could subdue weaker opponents with its special aura, while Hero's Blessing and Hero's Charisma were buff skills, significantly enhancing allies' courage and luck. Everything Masayuki did, good or bad, was interpreted positively by those around him. In battles, despite being a complete novice, his enemies would surrender under the influence of Hero's Haki, and onlookers would assume Masayuki had swiftly defeated them, earning him the title the Lightspeed Hero. This reputation brought Masayuki much trouble, but his attempts to clarify only made people think he was being modest, enhancing his fame further. Resigned, Masayuki began his journey as a hero, gathering companions like Jinrai, Bernie, and Jiwu, and later joining Rimuru. As the commander of the volunteer corps in this war, he was responsible for keeping safety and maintaining order in the town. Seeing Masayuki, Rimuru couldn't help but wonder if Masayuki had been targeting him all along, especially since there was intelligence suggesting Masayuki had the exact same looking as the Eastern Empire's Emperor Rudra. However, this suspicion was quickly dismissed by Lord of Wisdom. After calming down, Rimuru engaged in conversation with Masayuki, who reported that his duties as the commander of the volunteer corps were progressing smoothly, and the town's security was well managed. However, the researchers residing in the labyrinth under Demon Lord Luminous, known as the Overcomers with Special A capabilities, were eager to join the war. Unable to decide on this matter, Masayuki had asked his companion Jiwu and the Holy Knight Bacchus to pacify them while he sought Rimuru's assistance. Rimuru, not keen on getting involved, briefly consoled the complaining Masayuki and prepared to leave, advising that the war would soon end and this issue would naturally resolve itself. Rimuru's nonchalant attitude irked Masayuki's companion, Jinrai. Jinrai expressed his frustration, accusing Rimuru of exploiting their team in various ways and declaring that he had never given up on the idea of defeating Rimuru. Masayuki, trying to defuse the situation, reassured Rimuru and chastised Jinrai for his excessive behavior, reminding him of Rimuru's efforts for the townspeople. Jinrai, reminded by Masayuki, calmed down and refrained from further comments. However, just as the tension began to ease, another companion, Bernie, openly declared his intolerance towards the Demon Lord and his intention to take action. Without giving others a chance to react, Bernie began chanting a spell. As Rimuru wished for this commotion to end quickly, his expression suddenly turned serious. Bernie was chanting the Holy Field spell, a powerful barrier magic known to suppress demons, not something an ordinary person could wield. Even in the Falmouth attack, this spell required multiple casters to activate. In that instant, Rimuru realized that Bernie was the adversary he had been worried about. But someone else was quicker to act. With a crisp sound of clashing swords, Benimaru's Odachi collided with Bernie's Sword of Light. Masayuki and Jinrai were shocked, unaware that Bernie was skilled with a sword, indicating that even they had been deceived by Bernie all along. Bernie, unfazed, remarked that it would be foolish to reveal one's hidden tactics so easily. Rimuru understood that Masayuki and Jinrai were also victims of deception and positioned himself in front of Masayuki to protect him. On the other side, Benimaru stood firmly in front of Rimuru, intently observing Bernie's movements. Oddly, even after his failed surprise attack, Bernie remained confident, engaging in a relaxed conversation with Rimuru and the others. Rimuru was rapidly processing the situation, puzzled by Bernie's confidence, which he could only speculate was due to Bernie's reliance on the stable holy field. Meanwhile, the Lord of Wisdom was sorting through information at a terrifying speed, suggesting an ulterior motive for Bernie. According to the Lord of Wisdom, Masayuki's other companion, Jiwu, was not detected in the labyrinth, yet there were no records of her leaving. Rimuru sensed Lord of Wisdom's urgency, a rare occurrence. Lord of Wisdom informed that before Masayuki met Rimuru, Jiwu was supposed to join Holy Knight Bacchus to pacify the overcomers. However, it was confirmed that a series of killings occurred in the research facility on the 100th floor of the labyrinth, claiming the lives of Bacchus and several overcomers. Lord of Wisdom had already taken emergency measures to protect their souls. Indeed, the situation Rimuru feared had arisen. The overcomers were a group of special A-rank strong beings, and their complete annihilation along with a holy knight, shortly after parting with Masayuki, was alarming. More concerning was that even the all-knowing Lord of Wisdom had failed to detect these events. In that moment, without any time to ponder, Chloe's voice, quicker than thought, resonated directly in Rimuru's mind. An instant later, a black flash aimed at Rimuru's chest was narrowly avoided thanks to Chloe's timely warning. Seeing Rimuru unharmed, Bernie scoffed, frustrated that his well-crafted opportunity for Jiwu to assassinate Rimuru had failed. Jiwu, also emerging, expressed surprise at the little dwarf Chloe's ability to evade her detection and follow her. Chloe, angered at being called a little dwarf, transformed into her adult form, drawing her mythic-grade thin sword and pointing it at Jiwu. Despite the disruption of her plan, Jiwu showed no signs of faltering, extending a black blade from the necklace in her hand towards Chloe. Amidst this tension, Bernie and Benimaru were locked in a standoff. Chloe and Jiwu faced off with drawn swords, and Rimuru stood ready to protect Masayuki and Jinrai, with a looming crisis at hand. Alright, that's all for this video. In the next episode, we will delve into the details of this thrilling battle. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support fuels my continued efforts. See you in the next one.